This is the Fantasy Roadshow.
Welcome in, everybody. This is another episode of the Fantasy Roadshow. We are your hosts. My name is Ryan. This is Mike Kulz. You can find me on Twitter at fantasy_trucker. You can find him on Twitter at Kulz_sports. Mike, how are you doing today, buddy?
We are live.
Oh, I always forget. We are live. Live.
I am doing good. Excited to kick off a different sector of fantasy football. I know we've been talking a lot of Dynasty, had our first guest in yesterday, which was a great success. Have another guest that we're very excited about today. He's got a lot of experience in underdog and best ball. So we're going to get into some best ball, just kind of a little bit intro here over the next couple days, which we're excited. I think we're going to be doing an installment of Best Ball Fridays every Friday. So going to try to, get in some tips, tricks, what we look at when we see draft boards and kind of get started on that end.
Yeah, this is a great way to kick it off. Having this guy, our guest, on today is crucial, just to kind of give an introduction for the people that don't know what best ball is or who's never played it. We just recently, started playing this year, so I know I learned a lot from this conversation with him, and I hope everybody else does as well. So we're excited to get into it, and everybody, buckle up.
Buckle up.
All right, everybody, we are back again with our second guest.
Second ever guest.
Yeah, second ever guest. We got a special one here. Co-owner of the Triple Play Fantasy, contributor at the Fantasy Pros and 33rd Team, David Mendelson. How you doing, Dave?
Hey, I'm good, guys. Thanks so much for having me. 2 is actually my favorite number, so I'm honored to be your guys' second guest. I followed the great Scott Bogman, so Boggs is a great guy, and pumped to be joining you guys today.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks a lot for, we've only been at this for 2.5 weeks or so, and you were nice enough to come on and join us as our second guest. So we're very thankful for that. And man, let's get into it. So I think just kind of lay the land for listeners, where you're from, who your favorite team is, and kind of get into it from there.
So I originally grew up in Maryland. Last August, I moved to New Jersey with my wife. And so I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan, which is weird because neither of these areas are affiliated with the Kansas City Chiefs. But originally growing up in Maryland from then the Redskins at that time, didn't like the Redskins, didn't like Dan Schneider. Mostly that was kind of the big reason I didn't want to become a fan. So I said, what's a team with similar color schemes? And also, I guess it was kind of like the Indian type of transition. I was like, they're very similar to each other. At the time, the Chiefs were not good. So I was like, seems to me like the perfect alternative. And that was back 2005. So ever since then, I've been a diehard. And obviously the times have been pretty good recently.
Yeah, congratulations. That's very convenient, being from the East Coast and joining that team. And now here we are today. One thing that we did with Boggs, we'd love to do with you is, and our guests moving forward, is kind of give us your speed thoughts on the fantasy outlook for your favorite team. I think the wide receiver room is probably the most interesting. So very excited to get your thoughts there and see what you think.
Yeah, I mean, analysis on Patrick Mahomes. If he's not the QB1, at the very worst, he'll probably be a top 3 or 4 quarterback. So everybody that's listening to this, they know that, so they don't need to hear that. The running back room, I think, is also a little bit interesting. Pacheco obviously popped up on the PUP. They said he won't expect it to miss any time, going into the season, but it is kind of an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be his last year in Kansas City, so I'm sure they'll give him some work and kind of eat into some of Pacheco's work as well. They brought in Jerick McKinnon back, so he's going to get his receptions and get, spell Pacheco at times as well. I think a dark horse to watch in that backfield is Deneric Prince. Yeah, he was at the very, very end. The Chiefs took him in the 7th round, I believe. And he has the same type of workout measurables that Isaiah Pacheco has, kind of someone that stands out that you look at just their workout stuff and they're like, oh man, like this guy should have gone higher. So he's a lot of raw talent. I don't know if we'll see it right away, but he's a name just to kind of stash in the back of your minds that if, there's an injury in the backfield or ineffectiveness by multiple backs, I would not be surprised to see him get some carries this season if it shakes out that way. In terms of the wide receiver room, like you said, it's definitely the most interesting thing I think we're keeping an eye on right now. I think at this point, it's kind of like last season, you're taking dart throws. Some people were Juju Smith-Schuster people. Other people were taking shots on MVS. It's just, all around. I think as it stands today, if Kadarius Toney is healthy, Kadarius Toney is going to be the number one wide receiver in terms of receptions on that team. Will that translate to touchdowns? Will that translate to the most fantasy points? I can't tell you that specifically. I can tell you, I think if he's healthy, he will be the number one wide receiver in terms of receptions. But we've seen Kadarius Toney over the last few years. Health is a big question mark with him. So I do not think when the season is all said and done that he will be healthy for all 17 games. And I think when it comes down to it, who is going to actually lead the team in receptions is Sky Moore. I think a year in the system, and he's really been making strides. He's been, you're seeing off-season workouts with Patrick Mahomes throwing to him. He's the one I expect to take the biggest leap out of this wide receiver room. Him more than Rashee Rice, who just struggling today in workouts. Him over MVS, who he is what he is. Sky Moore, to me, if Kadarius Toney does not stay healthy, will be the guy you want on your fantasy teams.
I love that. What about Rashee Rice? What do we expect from the rookie?
I'm not expecting much. The Chiefs' offense is so complex. We saw it last year with Sky Moore. It takes a lot for a rookie wide receiver that's not highly drafted. Obviously we saw Jeremy Maclin and with the Eagles do it with Andy Reid when he was coaching there. But you have to, in most cases, I think, be a pretty special wide receiver, obviously drafted with very good draft capital to make an impact in Andy Reid's system from day one. I think Rashee Rice, there could be a random week he maybe has 5 catches for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. I would not say that's impossible. But I would say if you're going to trust Rashee Rice on your roster week to week, I do not see that happening in his rookie season. I think he's going to take some time to adjust. And that's going to be where Sky Moore is able to have had that year working with Mahomes and having those chances to learn the system. And Sky Moore is going to take that leap this season. And I think he's the one you'll want for sure.
Now the hard-hitting question. How many years left for Travis Kelce?
Oh, man.
The dynasty.
We all want to know.
Man. All the dynasty players want to know that, right?
I feel like we say every year, okay, this is the year that he's still going to be good. He's just not going to be peak Travis Kelce, right? I think I'm done questioning that. And I think as long as the Chiefs don't have wide receivers that are severely going to take away targets from him, which again, in this team, there's some good players. There's not an alpha wide receiver one on this team. I think he's safe to say at least this year. And I would say probably next year. If you listen to their podcast, he's very smart. He takes care of his body. He also, there's joke around that he tries to avoid the big hits. He goes down. That's what he does, man. He's not a Gronk type of tight end. He's not the tight end that's seeking, to ram someone over and get an extra 5 yards. He settles in a zone and then he'll get it. And then he'll run or he'll drop once he catches it in the zone, or, he'll kind of glide and kind of, the way he plays tight end is very different. So I think that way, I think it's safe to say he'll have another year or two where I think he'll be very dominant.
Yeah, Ryan and I have had this debate on the podcast and kind of came up with the same 2 to 3 years of being, effective. And then my one point, which is probably scary to hear being a Chiefs fan, but it's at his age, when he had that back injury late last year, everyone was worried. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Backs are no joke. So if he suffers a bad knee or back injury and it's season ending, it's tough at his age to come back and then take that full year to get back to that level. You know what I mean? So that's definitely the one, pending a bad injury. I think you're safe with 2 solid seasons and a third and just kind of seeing where they're at. They can be in a totally different place in 2-3 years, right? So
yeah, I will say this. He also said on his podcast that he's not going to linger. He said, when I'm done and I'm not playing at an elite level, I'm retiring. Like he came out and said he doesn't want to be one of those guys that's just lingering around. Like if I'm not playing at the level I'm accustomed to playing, I'm going to retire. So that's why I'm very confident that like if we start seeing a severe drop off from him, that he won't be afraid to call it quits, that he's not going to be somebody that you're going to draft and then he just all of a sudden no shows. So that's also like kind of gave me some encouragement. I'm like, okay, like if he's coming back every year, he feels pretty close to himself.
Yeah, to me, if they don't get another elite wide receiver or an elite wide receiver at all, I just don't see how he doesn't have these amazing seasons. I mean, he's putting up historic numbers. And if there's any time I'm gonna get caught holding the bag in fantasy football, I'm gonna get caught holding that bag. I'm gonna ride him until the wheels fall off. It's he's just, I don't see him slowing down ever. It's just with Patrick Mahomes, he just gets it done.
That's right. I mean, and the elite tight ends, they stick around for a while. I mean, Tony Gonzalez is the biggest example of that. He was like 36,
18 years. Yeah, 18 years in the NFL.
Played a while. Antonio Gates, the last few years weren't pretty, but for most of his career. I mean, Kelsey's been in the league a little bit, but not nearly as long as these guys. And again, he's not Gronk. Like I was saying before, like he's not somebody that's taking all these vicious hits. He usually is very smart with how, and again, people might call him soft, and that like he's spoken about that, but he was like, look, man, like I'll use my body when I need to, but like most of the time I'm trying to play the long game here. So it's like more, I'm looking at it as like the long game, smart decision type of thing. So I'm very confident. I think he's going to be a big part of this offense for at least the next 2 years.
Yeah, well, I'm always cheering for the Chiefs, so I'll be cheering for him again. But let's shift focus a little bit. Why fantasy, and how did you get to where you're at today? Give us that kind of background history journey.
Yes, I started playing fantasy football. I want to say it was like in 7th or 8th grade, and I got into it with a group of my home friends, and immediately I fell in love with it. Like, the competitiveness, playing week to week, and then you're looking at your box scores as the Sundays go, and you're like, oh my God, like they're getting all their touchdowns. Like, of course, the week I play them, and I was just like crazy, just like how much I was getting into it. And then it was right around when COVID started. Then we had all this extra time. I'm a teacher, so like I wasn't going into school, obviously, and easy to teach lessons. So we decided to make a podcast, and that was where Triple Play started. And it was originally just football, but then we morphed it into football, baseball, and basketball. And we started doing weekly pods. And then you talk to all the people in the industry who are all really friendly and just super open. Just always DMs are always available for them. And you just start falling in love with the community. And as we kept networking and talking with the community, then Triple Play has been able to grow. And we're very lucky that we've got over 3,000 subs on YouTube and been podcasting now for about 4 years. I think about 4 years, and it's been just a blessing, and I love it. And it's, again, getting to meet people like yourselves and others that are all just really open, friendly, and get to talk about a fun game. Obviously, that doesn't have real life implications, but it's something fun that we all get to do. So it's been pretty much my journey through it all.
Yeah, I love how the origin story seems to be similar for everyone. It's like right when I was introduced, absolutely hooked. And then kind of however they got to that journey to where they're, talking about it on a daily basis and so involved. It's, it all kind of, it's the same similar kind of journey to where, that passion just takes over. And it's like, all right, that's exactly what happened with Ryan and myself. We've been talking about a podcast the last couple of years, and we're just like, we just have to dive in and do it, So very happy we have. But this is our first year doing best ball, doing underdog. So wanted to bring on an expert. I don't know if you consider yourself an expert, but you're certainly involved with underdog and kind of know the tips and tricks. I think, we've done our research and know enough about fantasy football that we're excited. We think we'll be competitive. But yeah, wanted to talk tips, tricks, strategies that you have, and we'll put in a couple couple that we've caught on and at this early point in our underdog career that we've instilled, and then get the people some late round flyers and, get into some of the juicy stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, I love best ball. It's kind of interesting. I don't know how you guys feel about it, in the sense I've kind of like have hinted that I was like, I would love for our home leagues to be best ball, because I was like, I personally hate the decision factor. And if I lose a matchup because I played the wrong wide receiver 3 in my lineup, and that would have made the difference, to me, that like eats at me so much. I'm like, if I drafted the best team, like, let me get my best outcome. And that's what like best ball is. For those that are listening that have never played best ball, it's you draft a whole team, and then every single week it takes your mathematically best lineup and it puts it in for you. So you don't have to worry about the tough decisions of, do I play this player or this player? No, like, you drafted your team. You can't do the waiver wire. That's the one thing. If you are a waiver wire person, there is no waiver wire in season. So you have to stock up on plenty of depth at each of these positions. But again, there's no guessing. It's all just, let me watch how my team does. And obviously, there is a lot of money to be made in best ball as well. So it's a absolutely fun thing that started. I feel like it's starting to become big over the last 2, 3, 4 years. And it's definitely something that if you have not played in a best ball league, I would recommend you try it, especially for the fact that you can take swings at players that have huge ceilings, maybe have really low floors too. Like the poster boy for best ball is Deshaun Jackson when he was in his prime, because you would have the Deshaun Jackson, 5 for 150 and 3 touchdowns, and then you might have a 2 for 27 game. But then those huge games he's in your lineup, and those bad games he's not. So that's the fun part about best ball. You get to take swings on guys that you think are going to have huge games in 2023.
Yeah, when I first heard about best ball, I think last year I started dabbling in it here and there, but I was like, wait a second, I draft a team and then I don't have to make the wrong decision every week. This is great. It's because that was what I was riddled with for so long, is just, Mike likes to make fun of me. I get cute sometimes, and I right at the last minute, 20 minutes before kickoff, I'm like, oh, no. So it's great, man. I love the idea of best ball, and I'm glad we're finally diving into it head first. So I'm glad to have you on, that you know what you're talking about here.
Yeah, so I am either this is my perfect world. I would do away with pretty much every redraft I'm in, and I would either be dynasty or best ball, because don't give me the in between. You know what I mean? I want to either be a GM or I want to have the best draft, set it and forget it.
Yep.
Cheer. So, I think as the years go on, I'll probably kind of stray that way a little bit more. I think we're in 3 dynasty leagues now, and I'm in a couple redraft, mostly with, high school friends, people that we've built a camaraderie through, through the league. But I would like to draft 1 million basketball rosters and have a couple dynasty and keep it like that. So
I will say guillotine is starting to catch on too. I have a guillotine league that I'm in that it's actually very addicting too, because for those that haven't played guillotine that are listening to, it's the worst team every week, lowest scoring is out, and then you get to pick up all their players, but you have a certain amount of fab that you can spend on throughout the season. So that to me is also starting to become bigger, and I definitely recommend, if you've never played in a guillotine league, you do one, because it's fun.
Yeah,
we should. Mike and I were definitely talking about doing something along those lines, and we've just been so busy starting this podcast that's kind of get put on the back burner. But we'll definitely be revisiting that sometime soon.
Yeah. So give us you hear about stacking being one of the more common. I think it's gotten pretty mainstream here over the last couple of years. But what is your stacking strategy? Give us your go-to in your perfect draft. Is that what you're looking for? Is a QB 1, wide receiver 2? Give us what your kind of stacking strategy typically looks like.
Usually if you're going to stack, you want to get, it sounds kind of very elementary, but you're trying to get really good offenses. If I'm, do I want the stack for the Atlanta Falcons with, Desmond Ridder and Drake London? Or would I rather have a stack of Justin Herbert and Mike Williams? Or would I rather have a stack of, any of those other more high power, like a Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews type of thing, right? So I would say definitely when you're stacking, you want to make sure that you get pretty good offenses that are going to score a lot of points. And generally when you stack, you want to avoid doing the quarterback, running back, wide receiver stack for the most part. Usually you want to do a quarterback and their pass catcher, just because all three can't score touchdowns on the same play, right? So like, you know, if you have a pass catching running back like Christian McCaffrey, and then you pair it with Brock Purdy, that's your stack, that's fine. But then I would not also try to stack a wide receiver on top of that. Genuinely, when I'm making a build, if you want to stack a quarterback and two of their wide receivers, that's definitely okay. Again, if you're taking from the right offense. When I'm doing best ball, I know I mentioned earlier, I definitely take more swings on guys that have bigger ceilings. Again, could definitely bottom out and bite me, and I could be one of the worst teams in the league, but that's when you can take those shots. Like someone like a Ken Walker last year, you know, had led the league in 20+ yard runs. Like that's the type of player you could get if you draft Ken Walker. In a season-long league, you might be like, well, Zach Charbonnet's there, and I don't want to touch that backfield, but Ken Walker has those explosive type of runs in his game. You could get the wide receiver that gets 20 yards a catch, and then those are going to be more valuable. I would say ultimately my strategy at the end of the day, again, the high ceiling plays is a big one. I'll stack on really good offenses, and you have to build really good depth. There's a lot of great tools out there, a lot of great sites that will give you the exact numbers for each position that you should draft. But the worst thing you can do is if you don't draft enough of a position and then injuries happen, and then you can't pick up free agents. So you're taking zeros in certain spots. And that's where you will have no shot at winning best ball. So like usually they recommend to take at least 3 quarterbacks, to take at least 5 or 6 running backs, and then, you know, take like 8 wide receivers, and then take like 2 or 3 tight ends. It probably would say probably like 3 tight. Like again, every site you look at, they'll give you different parameters, but you want to have enough at each position where, again, hey, my first guy went down. Oh, my second guy went down. Okay, I can still at least get some points in those positions. And that's a mistake that some people will make their first year doing it, where they only draft 2 tight ends, and then both tight ends go down, and then they can't pick anybody, right? Or 2 quarterbacks and both quarterbacks go down. So like you just got to make sure you build up depth the right way.
Yeah, one thing I noticed this year, diving in more and more, is when you're drafting, when you're deciding to get either 2 or 3 quarterbacks or 2 or 3 tight ends, for me, it's where my first tight end and quarterback is being drafted is going to determine how many I have at that position. So if I'm able to get Patrick Mahomes, you know, I'm probably not going to be rostering 3 quarterbacks. I'm going to wait and grab my second quarterback later on. But if I wait and grab Deshaun Watson later on, I'm going to probably be looking to have 3. And the same goes for tight ends. You know, if you have that stellar stud, I'm not really looking to be too deep at that position. I don't know. Right. How do you feel about that?
I still always try to get 3, just because, you know, God forbid, there was a few years ago, Patrick Mahomes in that Denver game where he hurt his knee and he missed a couple games, and he hasn't QB sneaked since then. But in the game of football, anything can happen on any given play. So even if I have an amazing quarterback, I'll still bring 2 with them, just to have that. Again, like let's say, God forbid, Mahomes tore his ACL on Kyler Murray last year. Kyler Murray was considered one of those elite quarterbacks, especially with the rushing upside, and he's out. He was out for the rest of the year after the injury. So, you know, at the very least, I would recommend you take their backup. So just that way, it's like, hey, if my star quarterback goes down, at least I have the backup in that really good offense. And that way that'd be your third quarterback. But that's just me. I don't want to take a 0. So if anything were to happen. So at that point, you're almost guaranteeing you don't, because if you have the starter like a Josh Allen, okay, I have his backup if he gets hurt. So at least I will have that offense, the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills on my roster one way or another. So like that's how I personally will do it.
That's a good point.
So here's a question I have. And like when I envision what like having a very successful best ball roster looks like, it's hitting on some of these late round flyers we're going to talk about. So maybe a running back, let's say, you know, one of these second string running backs who a top dog goes down for 5-6 games out of the season, and you have him shoot up to being a, you know, low end RB1 or an RB2. So what's the strategy? You obviously have to be careful for that, right? Like what's your strategy with adding depth at those running back and wide receiver positions with some of these guys lower down on the back depth chart? Are you stacking them with, are you taking a Marvin Mims if you have Jerry Jeudy, or are you kind of just taking guys that you like that you think can have big games, and then that luck comes along the way? You know what I'm trying to get at there?
Yeah. Well, for the running back position, I look at when the RB1 is drafted in what they call the running back dead zone. So like usually anywhere from like it changes where you look, but it's kind of usually like round 3 to round 6. And a lot of times if you have an RB going in that range, you might see their teammate going, close or a little bit below that. And that's where I'm like, okay, this RB2 actually has a shot to either to overtake the RB1, or if the RB1 goes down, they could easily, Zeke and Tony Pollard last year was a perfect example of that. Zeke was being drafted ahead of Tony Pollard, but they were both going within a couple rounds of each other. James Conner and Chase Edmonds was another example of that last year. There's a lot of these types of backfield. You could say Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet this year. Like Kenneth Walker's the starter going in like round 3, 4, and Zach Charbonnet is going in like the 8th, 9th round. So these are running back 2s that if something happened to the RB1, they're very clearly the backup, and they're very clearly, if they're getting 20 touches a week, are probably going to be borderline like back end RB1s, high end RB2s. And again, you're being able to get them at a decreased cost. So with the running backs, that's definitely who I would try to target. And you'll see some things in camp, like take Tank Bigsby right now. There was a report about him coming out that when I'll get to more about him later, but like they're saying he's impressed in camp, and right now it's looking like he's going to be the RB2 to Travis Etienne, who does not have a spotless track record with injuries. So he's a great guy that you could draft in a best ball, and if something happens to Etienne, he's going to be in every week. He's going to be in your lineup. So I'd say the biggest thing is look where the RB1's being drafted. And if he's not like a slam dunk in the first couple rounds, you definitely have a better chance of the RB2 hitting. And also the RB1's injury track record too. As far as the wide receiver position, I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
No, go ahead. I just thought you were done. I was going to chime in, but go ahead, finish up.
No, I was going to switch to wide receiver. So if you,
Well, no, I was going to ask with running backs. It made me think of something like, are you more interested in grabbing that solidified number 2 in that backfield, or would you be more interested in grabbing a running back from an ambiguous backfield that's kind of up in the air, like for example, the Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert, and Deontay Foreman?
This is like the biggest question I think in fantasy is: do you take your own handcuff, or do you take like somebody else's, or you go try to attack another backfield, and then you could potentially have 2 RB1s? I think in this format, I like the going and getting somebody else's backfield. So if you draft Travis Etienne, I'm okay with letting Tank Bigsby, unless he falls at a really good value. I'm okay with trying to use more picks to take shots at other backfields. So if you draft Travis Etienne and then you take a shot on a Roschon Johnson later on, you could have Etienne as the RB8, and you could have Roschon Johnson be like the RB15, maybe, if he gets the number 1 job with the Bears. You're shooting for upside in best ball. You're shooting for the best team.
Yeah, the name of the game right there.
Exactly. And if you have Bigsby and you have Etienne, only one of them is going to probably be in your lineup every week. It's Etienne if he's healthy, probably, or if Bigsby has a 3 touchdown week, Etienne's not in your lineup. So in this format, that's when you definitely want to go the highest possible outcome, which is getting as many different backfields as you can. Obviously, if your starter gets hurt, you pay the price, but this is the format you definitely want to take those shots.
All right. Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that insight. Now, what were you getting into with wide receivers? Does the same go for wide receivers, or are you looking to have those number 2s established rather than those kind of the New York Giants type of wide receiver room?
Wide receivers, it's some of the same and some different. Wide receivers, you definitely look at offenses that have number 2s that actually get targeted. Obviously, like a team like the Chiefs, for example, like you'll see their wide receiver 1 be okay and Travis Kelce, and then their wide receiver 2 is kind of irrelevant most of the time. You might have a team like the New York Giants, who this year is going to be a Darren Waller, and then maybe their wide receiver 1 is okay. Whoever that's going to end up being, whoever takes that lead, but then their wide receiver 2 is probably not going to be somebody that's going to be in your lineup most weeks. But then you have a team like the Bengals, T. Higgins, or a team like the Eagles and Devonta Smith, where there's legit wide receiver 2s that are going to be getting a 20+% target share. if you're going to take a wide receiver 2, just make sure it's one of those offenses where they're the no doubt wide receiver 2, where they're the no doubt second target. That's the big thing for that. And then in terms of if you're taking like later round picks on wide receivers, look for guys that the previous season just were getting on the field and running routes, because if you're taking a guy that was barely getting on the field, like the first guy that pops on my head is someone like Jalen Guyton for the San Diego or the Los Angeles Chargers. Always mix that up. The Los Angeles Chargers. He's barely on the field. So yeah, he could have some amazing weeks, but he's not running a lot of routes, as opposed to somebody like a Tyler Boyd who's on the field a lot, running a lot of routes. So if something happens to T. Higgins, guess who's stepping up and getting the second most amount of targets on that team? It's Tyler Boyd, right? So that's something I look at when I draft. Is I'll look at, all right, outside the top 2 wide receivers, who's running a lot of routes? So if something happens to one of the better wide receivers, who's going to be on the field running a good amount of routes, and then also getting the ball probably thrown to them a lot too. So that's kind of how I'll attack, wide receivers. Tim Patrick is another example. I'm going to get to him later too, but like he's somebody that everyone talks about, Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, but Tim Patrick runs a lot of routes, and he might sneakily be the best wide receiver with the Broncos this season. Russell Wilson talks him up a lot. So just do your research, figure out who is actually on the field running a lot of routes and who's actually being involved. And then again, they're going to maybe have a crazy week here and there, or if something happens to a starter ahead of them, they step up and they get a lot of targets thrown their way.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we were talking stacking. Let's get into our favorite value stack. I'll kick it off just because I like we've probably done what, Ryan, like maybe 10 of these drafts so far, and I always 10 or 12, and I always find myself at least pushing for this team, and not just to troll on Ryan as we are. He's a diehard Bears, but I think that the Packers are going to surprise people, and I seem to love getting. I know you mentioned like pass catchers and quarterbacks is like what you want to focus on, but I find myself loving Aaron Jones at his like 53.8 ADP. I just think I think with Love getting settled into an offense, they're going to lean on him a lot. And he has caught balls in the past, but the fact that you can get Jordan Love at 161.5 and then get Aaron Jones in that, late 4th or 5th round seems very attractive to me, because then you have the option of going Romeo Doubs or Jaden Reed late. Jaden Reed's going at 169.4. Their tight end one is, there's just a lot of questions there, and I just don't think they're going to be as bad as everyone thinks. Like they can just as easily win the NFC North as they could coming fourth. So I don't know. What do you think about that Packers offense? A lot of question marks, but I think because of that, there's good value.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. I think because there's so many question marks that there's a lot of value to be had there. I think Christian Watson might be the most polarizing player in fantasy football this offseason. I see people that are way out on him and people that are super in on him. Yeah. So we saw a little bit of a glimpse of him and Jordan Love, or a little bit, but as far as the Packers in general, I probably will take the L this year if they do have a good offense. I'm probably just not touching most. I do have Christian Watson and Scott Fishbowl because he fell like 2 rounds after ADP, so I scooped him up. But I don't think I'll have too much of that offense. I need to see it. I don't trust having Jordan Love on any of my teams. I especially as my QB2. Aaron Jones, I'm a little bit concerned about because he had 4 touchdowns total in 2021, and he had 2 touchdowns total last season. And this offense, I don't think will be nearly as good as it was with Aaron Rodgers. Again, maybe I'll be wrong. But they also, when they get in close, they have A.J. Dillon there too, who's they're kind of more of a goal line back who I think could take touchdowns away from Aaron Jones. So I'm a little bit scared of that offense. Again, like you said, there could definitely be a lot of value there. And Romeo Doubs is also, a great guy to potentially target as a wide receiver too in that. But yeah, I'll definitely take the L if the Packers have a really good offense this year. I probably won't have too many of their guys.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, David. I am just waiting to see their demise this year, and I just can't wait, man. Speaking as a true Bears fan, I have watched the Packers just dominate for the better half of 2 decades now. So I hope they struggle. But on the other side of it, Mike and I have been drafting quite a bit of the Packers. Aaron Jones. On the other hand, I hear what you're saying, and you make a lot of good points, but I just feel that Aaron Jones is going to be just a safety net for Jordan Love, and kind of the help him with the struggling, getting into the whole motion of being the Packers quarterback. So, but absolutely, my value stack is the Cleveland Browns. I like drafting Deshaun Watson. His ADP is right around 83.7. I love drafting Mike, and I love drafting Jerome Ford late at 180, right around there. I can't get enough of him in drafts. And then Elijah Moore at 97.1. Deshaun Watson is one of the only later round quarterbacks that has some sort of established rushing history. So he has that upside with him. I just think the team's going to be much better than it was last year. And Jerome Ford is set to be the number 2 behind Chubb. And we've seen throughout the last, 5 or 6, 7 years or so that Cleveland likes involving more than one running back. So I expect to see him quite a bit. Although Chubb, I do think, will be the top scoring running back this season. I think he's definitely capable of doing that. But I don't know. How do you feel about the Browns as a value stack?
I love it. Yeah, I think Elijah Moore is in for a big year. I love Nick Chubb. I'm right there with you. I think he's the RB1 this year. And I was a big fan of Jerome Ford coming out of college. And so I'm excited to see him get some snaps as the number 2 back. I'm completely in step with you, totally on the Cleveland Browns for sure.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Who do you have for a value stack?
A couple that came to mind for when I saw this question. Justin Fields, I know he's not necessarily the biggest value at quarterback, but at QB6, but DJ Moore's wide receiver 25. And I think he's going to be 1,000-yard receiver this year, which, by the way, on FanDuel is plus money that he'll get 1,000 yards this year. He's had 1,000 yards in 3 of his 5 seasons with really bad QB play. I do think that they're going to have be in sync a lot this year. A little bit lower, Trevor Lawrence at QB8 and Calvin Ridley at wide receiver 19. I think Calvin Ridley is going to shock people this year. I think people think he's out of football for a year, and his ADP is reflecting that. I think he's going to be the alpha on this team. And Trevor Lawrence is firmly shown, I think, flashes he's a top 10 quarterback, and I think he continues to ascend in that way. So I think that stack is going to put up a lot of points this year. Lawrence with his wide receiver 1, who's one of the better route runners in the NFL. So I think you're getting Ridley at such a value right now, and that's just the best ball ADP. And redraft ADP, I think he's like the wide receiver 25. So that's why I think it's way too much of a value right now for what that upside could be.
Do you think there's going to be some growing pains there for Ridley? You saw it with Watson knocking some of that game rust off. Do you think you're going to see that early in the season and then him explode, mid to late? Or do you think he's just been chopping at the bit, kind of come out balling?
I don't expect from week 1 for him to come out and put up amazing numbers. But I think when you look back at the season, he's going to be somebody that puts up 11 or 1,200 yards and 10 to 12 touchdowns. Yeah. And he's the firm number 1 wide receiver on this team. Target-wise, reception-wise. I see Christian Kirk's a very capable number 2. Evan Ingram is a very capable pass-catching tight end. So it's not like you can just focus on him. And that's going to also allow him, I think, to not get as much focus of the coverage early on. I think it's going to allow him to get his feet under him. Obviously, Zay Jones can stretch the field as well. There's a lot of good pass catchers on this team. Yes, I don't think it'll be happening right away. I would love to be wrong, but I think give him a game or 2 to get back to being in the league, and then he'll be fine. I mean, he's if you've seen the work, he's been staying in really good shape. And the good thing for him is I can't imagine being a quarterback and being out as long as Deshaun Watson was, where you're not able to be in the building practicing And you can't really practice being a quarterback because you're not playing against defenses, right? Maybe you're just throwing to people, but the whole thing being in a game with defenses and coverages. With Ridley, he's still able to practice running his routes. He's still able to go against, people guarding him. I think it's definitely going to be easier adjustment for him than it was for Watson.
Yeah, I'm a huge Lawrence guy. I think he's going to take another huge leap this year. He's got some of those pass catchers he had last year in Kirk and Ingram, he has that game experience with them taken to a next level, and then adding just a complete weapon like Calvin Ridley. So very excited to see what they do. Give us some late round flyers. I know I mentioned I guess we can just start at quarterback and work ourselves down, but let's see what you got there.
I'm going to give you a really late QB. I'm gonna try to go as deep for all of these as I can.
Same.
So I'm gonna double check what quarterback he is right now. He is QB 38, and that's Sam Darnold.
Okay.
I think that if we're talking about really deep late shots here, Brock Purdy, we have no idea if he's going to be ready for week 1. It's still a question right now. Trey Lance is the number 3 quarterback as we're going into today. And it does not seem like he is going to get a shot with this team. Sam Darnold has talked about, I've heard him on multiple podcasts this offseason. He's talked about this is the most professional organization he's ever been in. He said he's learned to be a quarterback better in this organization. And then obviously we've seen what this system has done for guys like Nick Mullins, for guys like CJ Beathard, for guys obviously like Jimmy Garoppolo, guys like Brock Purdy, who was the 7th round or last pick in the draft. This is a very quarterback friendly offense, and you have amazing weapons on this team. If there's any chance that Brock Purdy is not healthy and something happens, you have Sam Darnold quarterbacking this team, and you get him at QB 38. He is 100% worth the dart throw just for the chance that he might play snaps for them this season.
Yeah, I love that. And honestly, he's got an arm too, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's always been known for that gunslinger type of quarterback play. So if he gets a shot, I'm with you. He could really, and if anyone gets a shot with this offense, right?
Exactly, right. And he's the number 2 behind Brock Purdy as it stands today. So a guy that's there's still question marks if he's ready for week 1.
One of their beat writers came out and said he's the best ball thrower the 49ers have ever had. So I don't know how true that is. There's a great list of quarterbacks from that team, but it'll be interesting to see. I don't hate that at all.
So I have Lance as mine.
There we go.
I've been
nice segue.
I've been pretty vocal about Purdy being a game manager, and the narrative of him and that being his team is all to just instill confidence heading in, because they had every single piece to win a Super Bowl. They had the best defense, all of those weapons, and he was their only option. So in an attempt to, instill that confidence in him heading into the playoffs, of course, you're going to do anything you can. This is your team. You're our franchise quarterback. See what you can do. And then he didn't. It's not like he led a fourth quarter drive against the Eagles and made a big throw to make them think that he is their franchise quarterback. What makes him any different than Garoppolo, which is ultimately why they moved on from him? He didn't do that. So he just didn't get the opportunity, right? But he certainly wasn't out there making plays with his arm as a Darnold could end up doing. So I just think Trey Lance does have an opportunity to remind them this training camp, this is why you drafted me number 3 overall. And if that does happen, then I think he's in potentially the best position to have all the weapons around him and potentially win a Super Bowl in the next, few years. Cause they're certainly one of the teams that is sitting there with the opportunity. So how's that going to play out? I think we're all cannot wait to see, but very well the Falcons could come knocking. Let's say Darnold ends up being the guy that wins it, and I still think there's a chance that Lance could end up maybe on the Falcons. I think I haven't seen myself taking Lance too much in best ball this far, because he has to win that Niners job to start producing right now. And then even if he does get traded, what are the chances he plays this year? I don't know. But yeah, as a QB 32 late round, last round flyer, that payoff could be huge. And I think, similar reasons why you took Darnold.
If Purdy doesn't start, one of them is going to be best value.
And one of us is going to look really smart.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, my quarterback is Brock Purdy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. But no, my late round flyer, I was toying with this idea, but since the recent news of DeAndre Hopkins signing with the Tennessee Titans, I feel like Ryan Tannehill is just left for dead. A lot of people were discounting him as, is he even going to be the quarterback for the whole season? I think he is. I mean, we're a few years removed from him being a top 10 quarterback. Like he was very active, and that the team won. They were the number 1 seed in the AFC a couple of years back. So I just think that Ryan Tannehill is being drafted a little too low right now, and I'm willing to grab him as a late round flyer.
I love that. I think you're 100% spot on. Like, he's not flashy, but he's being very disrespected right now, and he's still a very capable quarterback.
Yeah,
100%.
and Hopkins. I mean, Hopkins can make a bad quarterback look good. I mean, let's be real. Hopkins is that good. So,
100%.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Hopkins has made a career of making bad quarterbacks look good, and I don't think Tannehill is a bad quarterback. Right? He's had some very successful teams. Levis does not seem to be ready, really mentally more than physically. And Malik Willis kind of had a shot there. So totally agree. My running back was Jerome Ford. So I'm going to pass it over to you, David, and in picking a late round running back, as Ryan stole mine in his stat conversation.
Well, there's 2 I really like. Tank Bigsby, we kind of talked about before. Yeah. He's really shining in camp, and ETN has a spotty injury history. Also had trouble converting last year when he was at the goal line. I forgot the exact statistics, but his goal to go rushes were very poor, and actually him converting. So Tank Bigsby is going to be the guy I think that they lean on when they get closer to the goal line, a bigger back. And again, if anything happens to ETN, he's shown he's capable of catching passes, and he's shown he can run between the tackles. And he also has enough speed where maybe he's not full on like a speedster, but he can get a long run if he needs to. So Tank Bigsby, I think, is a big one. He's not as much of a value now. I'm looking at the Fantasy Pros consensus best ball ADP, and
he's been rising.
Yeah, now he's RB 47, so he's continually starting to go up. The one that I'm been hanging my hat on the most this offseason, I think the player that I'm going to end up being known as for the most going in this year, I haven't seen too many talk about him, is Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. That's my guy this year. Yeah, he's like, everybody talks about Kendra Miller, or they'll talk about McBride with the Vikings, or they'll talk about JSN, all these other rookies. I don't ever hear anybody talk about Chase Brown. And Chase Brown, obviously not great draft capital, a 5th round pick, but this is a 3-down back that the only thing he needs to work on is his pass protection. Everything else of his game is phenomenal. And he's in the best situation that I don't think people realize, with Joe Mixon as the RB1 ahead of him. I was trying to pull up, I had some Joe Mixon efficiency stats, basically his yards per carry, yards after contact, every pretty much advanced metric. He went down majorly last season, and I can think he's going to continue to regress. He had to basically take half of his money that he was going to get just to stay with the team. It's a guy on his last leg. And I think genuinely his just efficiency has been decreasing every single year. And who else is on that team? Well, you have Travion Williams, who has been on the backup for that team the last, I believe, 2 seasons. And he can't get any, Savaje Perine was the one who got the backup load, and they brought him in and kind of groomed him to be the RB2. Travion Williams has been chilling as an occasional pass catching back. Same with Chris Evans. Chris Evans is not someone that's going to get a lot of carries. He'll play some 3rd downs and be a pass catcher. They don't have a legit running back on this team outside of Joe Mixon, besides Chase Brown. So if if Joe Mixon ends up being super inefficient, which I continue to expect that he will, there is one legit running back on this roster, and that's Chase Brown. So unless they go and they sign Dalvin Cook, or they go and they sign Leonard Fournette, or they go and they, bring in one of these running backs, which I don't think they will unless Joe Mixon gets hurt and they already haven't been signed, Chase Brown's the guy. And I do think even if they do bring in one of those guys, they're going to have Chase Brown go on the field, and Chase Brown's going to be super explosive, and he's going to be the guy, man, I wish I drafted him. He was free in drafts, and he's going to finish as like the RB, like the RB 23. And, he had like 5 weeks where he was an RB1 at the end of the season. Like, he's going to be, I think, that league winner, somebody that you get on the waiver wire halfway through the season that's going to be an RB2 in your lineups at the end of the year. And I think he's the guy. So he's my favorite dart throw this season.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, watching him at Illinois last year, he was a beast. And I was really beating that drum with Mike. I was telling him all about Chase Brown earlier. This was prior to Joe Mixon restructuring his contract. That kind of had me back off a little bit. Just the thought of Joe Mixon being cut or released from that team, and then Chase Brown, it was like, let's go. So, but yeah, no, I love that. I'm drafting Chase Brown wherever I can get him later on in drafts.
I think it's actually good, because if Mixon was cut, Chase Brown's ADP would have gotten out of control, and it wouldn't have been of value anymore. But the fact that Mixon is staying, I think is a better situation, because again, they could have brought in one of these other guys, and I think they'll go into the season. Dalvin Cook will be signed. Leonard Fournette will be signed. Zeke, I think, will be back with Dallas. There won't be any of these guys out there. And I think almost by default, if Mixon is horrible or he gets hurt, like, they're going to have to go to him. And that's why I think, again, you're getting him as like RB60 right now. So it's an insane value for what could be the number 2 running back in one of the league's best offenses.
Yeah. Who do you got, Ryan?
My running back flyer is Israel Abanikanda, backup running back for Breece Hall over in the New York Jets, man. It's not official. He is not the number 2 behind him. I mean, he's still got to beat out Michael Carter, but that shouldn't be that hard. And Zonovan Knight. So I expect him to be the full-fledged number 2 in that offense. And, I mean, I just think they're going to be an elite team all around. And if I can get the number 2 behind Breece Hall, who's coming off this injury, like, we don't know how well he's going to bounce back from this. But I think Abanikanda is still going to see some time on the field and see some legit opportunities with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. I want a piece of the Jets anywhere I can get him. And Israel Abanikanda is being drafted at like the 215. So anywhere after that, I'm willing to take a shot on him. Mike, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I will definitely say that I'm such a Breece Hall guy that I'm just like, I don't know. I don't want his RB2. I want to be all over Breece Hall instead and like just keep riding out his production. But, the reality is that coming off a knee injury, like, there's going to be someone else there. I'm praying that that's not get Dalvin Cook. But honestly, like, Dalvin Cook makes a lot of sense going to the Jets. Because they brought in Aaron Rodgers to win a Super Bowl like in the next 2 years. And Dalvin Cook gives you the stability if there's any hiccups in Breece Hall coming back. So I really hope he doesn't end up a Jet. I honestly think Fournette's is going to the Patriots. I saw he was working out for him today. I just think the fit there is so well. So if they're off the table, then I think the Jets, maybe you see the Dolphins make one more push, but I just feel like they would have signed him by now if he was going there. So I don't know. I think Cook to the Jets makes a lot of sense right now, and it scares me because I own him in a dynasty league or 2.
I think the Patriots are the betting favorites right now to get him, but that was before Fournette workout. Yeah.
I just think it makes so much sense. Like, Fournette is at a point in his career where he comes in and he's going to take a pretty good workload off of Ramondre, but also just be such a good mentor, and like playing with Brady and where with his maturity level, he just makes seems like it's a really good fit, and he is a Patriot at this point in his career, but I don't know. Anyways. So speaking of Patriots, I have Tyquan Thornton as my late flyer wide receiver. I think, Devontae Parker getting signed to a big deal, them not getting Hopkins. In my mind, Tyquan Thornton's the best ball receiver on that roster. We heard the hype last year, all preseason, and then him kind of getting that injury. I just think that he, if you're going to see some big balls, some big plays out of Mac Jones, there's not going to be a ton, but they're going to go to Tyquan Thornton in my mind.
Yeah, I like that. He's already a deep threat, and he's been in the the Bill Belichick system. And if they don't bring anybody else in, he's definitely a value in drafts. I like that call.
Yeah, 174.5 ADP. So that's where I'm going.
Yeah, I think that offense is just going to be much better this year with Bill O'Brien and Mac Jones, Macaroni Jones, as we like to call him. But I just I don't know. That's it's an ambiguous wide receiver room, so we'll see what happens there. Who do you have, David, as your wide receiver flyer?
I'll keep it simple here. Tim Patrick, who I mentioned earlier, wide receiver 76 in best ball. They said he was potentially going to be the wide receiver 1 when Russell came last year, and then he had the injury and he missed the whole season. And now he's back. And Cortland Sutton seems like kind of an afterthought in this offense. Doesn't really work out well with Russ's game. I think Jerry Jeudy is definitely going to be the favorite, and rightfully so, to be the number 1 pass catcher. But Tim Patrick, man, he's forgotten about a lot. And the fact that he's wide receiver 76, when they were talking about him having the most, being most in sync with Russ last year, I think he's an insane value.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, the Broncos, the Broncos, to me, if I wasn't going to talk about the Packers, kind of to troll on Ryan earlier, but because I do like the value in some of those players, the Broncos to me is a team that's going to make a huge step forward. So a guy like Patrick, I think Judy's going to be really good there too, just from how talented he is. But bringing Sean Payton and Dulcich. Dulcich is another guy that I'm super high on. He's extremely talented. Sean Payton, between him and Russell, just proven winners in this league, that they got to take a big step forward. And they got beaten up a little bit last year. Anyone that was excited about the Broncos last year and drafted, Sutton and Russell Wilson, it's got to be one of the more frustrating, first 5-6 weeks, however long you rode with them. They're just so bad. Yeah,
I was one of them. It was rough. It was not fun. Not fun. But Tim Patrick, man, I feel like the only thing about it, he has one of the most unattractive names in fantasy football. Names are part of the fun, and Tim Patrick is just.
Yeah.
I think if he had a much better name, I feel like people would be a lot more on his bandwagon. But I like that pick, definitely. My wide receiver pick, I was kind of dancing with a few of these guys, and I'm going to grab Michael Wilson, wide receiver for the Cardinals. He's your big-bodied receiver, kind of your stereotypical wide receiver 1 stature. And I don't know, man. I obviously Hollywood Brown is going to be the target hog on that team, and they're going to be playing from behind pretty much all season. Without Kyler, I would say they're the worst football team in the NFL. So it's going to be positive game scripts for him. And Rondell Moore is great too. I think Michael Wilson could really work in and be a go-to target for who's ever playing quarterback. And honestly, I think Kyler's going to come back pretty strong from this injury. He was aiming to come back week 1. Obviously, that's a stretch. Nobody really expects that to happen, but I could see him coming back as early as week 4 and looking to Michael Wilson as the big play threat. So I'm willing to take him at he's being drafted right around pick 214. So.
Yeah, he's a great pick. I'm a Greg Dortch guy myself, but I
okay.
definitely could see it. I could see it.
Yeah, so another good segue to my tight end, I had Trey McBride. I'm all over Trey McBride. I just
Great
think
pick.
he was such a great pass catcher in college, and he's stepping into a role that Ertz, had high production before getting injured. I think it's kind of Trey McBride's time. So there's a lot of question marks in Arizona. Is Clayton Tune going to be the quarterback week 1? If let's say Kyler doesn't come back till week 6 and they're 0-6. Does Kyler kind of punt that coming back down the road a little bit in hopes of getting that 1 or 2 pick this next year? So I don't know. A lot to play out in that offense, but Trey McBride is someone that could step into a huge role and thrive.
Yeah, I like that safety blanket for whatever rookie is in there. Whether it's Clayton Tune or if they have anybody else step in there. I think that's a good call.
Yeah.
Mine is Jelani Woods of the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah,
he's a value right now. He didn't even play.
Yeah,
he didn't even play the first, I think it was 5 games of the season. He didn't get his first catch until the last week of September, and kind of didn't really get too integrated in. But all of a sudden, right middle of the season against the Pittsburgh Steelers, had 8 catches on 9 targets for 98 yards. And after that game, if you include that game, he had at least 4 targets in 5 of his last 6 games. 3 receptions for 19, 3 receptions for 43, 2 receptions for 28, 1 for 36. I think he was kind of their big play threat. He's also a big target in the red zone, 6'7", 253 pounds. He's definitely the number 1 tight end for this team. And Anthony Richardson, it's definitely going to obviously fall on him if how much he's going to throw to compare how much he's going to run. But I think a big target like this in the middle of the field, I think is somebody that is going to be a value for where he's going. So the number 1 tight end for this team, and he showed flashes last year with really bad quarterback play. So I can't see Anthony Richardson being worse than what we saw last season from the QB position. Maybe even just his mobility will extend plays for Woods to be able to get downfield more. So I think he's definitely one of those great tight end 2 targets you can get in best ball.
Yeah, I love Jelani Woods, man. I grabbed him last year, and just some of the flashes that we saw from him. He has such a promising skill set, and just being such a big target. It's he just looks like a man amongst boys out there on the field. He's just massive. My tight end I wanted to talk about late. It's not too late, but I think it's still pretty decent. Is Mike Gesicki. I know we were talking about the Patriots. And, Mike Gesicki's already practicing with the wide receivers and playing in the slot while all the other tight ends are working on blocking. Like the Patriots are looking at him as a wide receiver, running back, wide receiver tight end, a hybrid. And, I could see him being a threat in the red zone for the new and improved Patriots offense.
Love that.
Yeah. So I have a couple of final thoughts after talking through that. One thing that you said, David, that stuck with me was about Rodgers and how he kind of didn't make that Packers offense look very good. Mm-hmm. And that scared me because I agree. They looked so bad at times, and you do have a lot of those same pieces. I guess I'm hoping that, as a Bears fan that saw Rodgers step into Favre's shoes and be like, just rejuvenate and take off, I think for my take's sake, I hope that, and a little bit of my bankroll's sake, that I hope Love does the same thing and grows with some of those young pieces. But that stuck out to me. And then also Bigsby, he's been pretty hot by most people here in the industry. A lot of people are on him. Yeah. A lot of that hype is starting to build. And like you said, that value may not still be there because of it. I have a theory that NFL teams, front offices are seeing franchise quarterbacks come in and like the comfort of a skill player that they've had success with in college. So your Jamar Chase to Joe Burrow, your ETN to Trevor Lawrence. So because of that, I think ETN has a little bit of security on the field. That being said, you brought up a good point with his injury risk. So anyways, that's a little theory that I like, and I hope continues to build. Maybe, I don't know, you see it with a Caleb Williams. Some of these franchise guys, you see a little comfort a little comfort blanket as they're adapting to the speed and the size of the league. They bring in kind of a comfort piece with them. So anyways, that's just a theory that I have.
No, I like it. That's a good theory. I'm just excited that we are like a month and a half away from
50 days.
Yeah,
50 days.
50 days.
Thank God.
Yeah. Well, so thank you so much. So like we had we had Bogman on yesterday to tie up the end of our dynasty ranks, and we have you on today to kick off our best ball. Tomorrow we're going to do a best ball draft live on the Friday episode. So thank you so much for coming on. I mean, incredibly nice of you. I know you kind of shared your experience getting into fantasy. Like, people just, welcome you with open arms. You did the same to us. So thank you so much for coming on. We had a blast.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for having me, man. This was a lot of fun, and you guys keep doing your thing. I'm sure you guys are going to take this pod places. So any way I can do to help you guys or anything, just let me know.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll definitely we'll probably call you later on in the season, have you come back on.
Yeah, we'll get some Chiefs. We'll get some Chiefs insight, and hopefully maybe get another guy on with a rival fan base. Get you guys talking shit before the season starts.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Looking forward to it.
All right, great. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and you guys buckle up, everybody. All right. If you guys are living under a rock and you don't know about this draft guide yet, you need to familiarize yourself, because this is the best draft guide on the market. I'm talking the Sports Ethos Fantasy Football Draft Guide. It is live now, right, Mike? It's live. We're live.
The draft guide is live.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is just chock full of tools. You got positional rankings, PPR rankings. And everybody knows PPR is standard, right, Mike?
That's right.
But we cover all different bases here. We got wide receiver reports, running back reports. Do you guys want to know about the aging wide receivers who you should curve, and which young receivers who are ready for a breakout? I mean, it's got it all. It's, you name it, and it's covered on the Sports Ethos Draft Guide.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just for the amount of money it is and the amount of tools, and I know the brains that go into it, some of the smartest guys in the industry. So go ahead, spend the $4 and unlock a pretty extensive guide.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you got your drafts coming up soon, one of the best tools I think they have on here is the draft strategy tool. It breaks down all the different draft strategies that you need to be aware of going into this draft, and you don't want to be drafting without it. Absolutely not. So again, it's $4 a month. You can find it at sportsethos.com, and go and get you some. Right, Mike?
That's right.
All right. Well, we had a great time today with our interview and our episode. We hope everybody learned something about best ball, and hopefully if you're listening and you haven't played best ball, go check out Underdog Fantasy. Go fall into a $25 best ball mania draft. Hey, maybe you'll win $3 million. Who knows, right? You never know. Right. But it doesn't hurt to try, so get out there and go play some fantasy football. Other than that, everybody, buckle up.